We were still stuck in the
The
1600s.
lovely antiques from the
Yes,
1600s.
yeah, the 1600s.
Wow.
Yeah. With the old record players, of course, they weren't that old, I suppose. The gramophone, the old gramophone that, um, you opened one side, it had the record player, and then the radio. What did my father call it? The wireless. And that was really old. That was an old gramophone. Our range was ancient. The range, that they lit in the kitchen every now and again. When there was no electricity, the range was lit. And that's how we cooked. We cooked on the range. You could boil the kettle on it or on the fire. And it was expensive to run because that was primarily, we used coal for that, whereas the fire we could use, regular firewood. And but that was really, really old. And we had a lot of people come in looking for that range. I know that was a hot item. Excuse the pun, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about the gramophone, and we can see your guitar over there,
Yeah.
possibly, was your family very musical?
My father was a fantastic singer. He had a trained voice. His sister, I know you're going to ask me more about this. She was famous opera singer in her time. She was well known. She'd been trained very well, and had gone over to London to sing over there. And her name is Betty, so she was the one that I was named after. So she was a famous opera singer. So I guess they knew what they were doing when they named me after her. But my father was fabulous singer, just a fabulous singer, and he played piano. I don't remember him playing that often, but every now and again, I'd say I heard him play the piano maybe 10 times in my whole life. So he wouldn't sit and play. He was an artist as well, painter. Anyway, it's stirring a lot of memories. And my father was a difficult man. And so we won't go into it too much. But anyway, he was not very encouraging with my music. My mother was the one that I have a lot to thank for my music. She snuck me out and brought me to whatever music things I got involved in. My father was not very encouraging. And so he, basically told me I couldn't sing, and because I wasn't trained and they didn't have the money to train me. So anyway, I have my mother to thank for that.
And where did you learn to sing? You said your mother
it was a natural. Singing tends to be a natural gift, I think, when it's nurtured right as well, I suppose. And I was singing from when I was 4. I got a skipping rope for one Christmas present. I got a skipping rope, and on St. Stephen's Day, the day after Christmas, which is you might know it as Boxing Day. In Ireland, we call it St. Stephen's Day, and we had all the relatives come down from Dublin on my mother's side. So I think my father was gone up to the pub, I'm sure. Anyway, so the skipping rope came out, and I entertained them for a long time with the skipping rope until I had a temper tantrum because they were laughing at me so much, and I thought they were laughing at me, but really they were laughing with me. And so that was my first memory of singing. I think I was 4.
Do you remember what you sang?
I sang, "I'll be your long-haired lover from Liverpool." I won't sing it for you. It must have been some pop song that was on at the time, So I had my microphone. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of a love. And that's one of the things that I'm very happy that I have that gift, because I love to sing, and I can always remember loving to sing. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad you kept singing.
Yeah. I will always sing until somebody tells me to stop. And then I'll secretly sing in a closet when that happens. So, yeah, that's my biggest hobby.
Okay, we'll come back to singing. How about school?
School, in primary school, I went to the local school. It was about a mile up the road, Wilkinstown National School. And it was very small. We had 5 classrooms, I think. No, we had less, because we shared, it would have been, babies. It was called babies, or infants and high infants. And then it was first class and second class. So two classes in one. So can you imagine, that would have been, unheard of now, because you go into first grade, there's usually four classes of first grade, and even in Ireland it's probably that way because the population has like skyrocketed. But so we shared, each class had one teacher. So for example, in first class, I would have had second class kids in there as well, and then third and fourth, and then fifth class. That was all in national school. And I can remember just being petrified my whole way through school. And I wouldn't say I was the best student in the world. If we had been encouraged the right way, I think that I would have done much better. But anyway, in secondary school, I went to Loretto Convent in Navan, which was 7 miles from our house. And we took the bus, the public school, not the public, we took the public bus that went from King's Court to Dublin every day. It was a public bus, and we got on it every morning at 8 o'clock. And our bus driver was Willie, and if we weren't outside, he would stop and wait for us, and he'd beep the horn. And I can remember waking up some mornings, and he'd be beeping, and you'd be going out of your bed, and you'd have to shout out the window, "Go on!" So we jumped on the bus, and we went all the way into Navan, 7 miles away. And most of the kids that were our neighbours went to the local, the tech down the road, which would have been going the other direction, and they got a public school bus to that. But we were different, and we had to go to Loretto Convent in Navan, us, fine girls, to be brought up with the nuns. So, and then my brothers went to the brothers in Navan. They didn't go to the tech as well. So we went. I went there from what would have been called first year. It's first, second, third, fourth, and fifth year. And you take your intercert in your third year and your leaving cert exams, which are your final exams, in fifth year. And we, most kids left school at 3, but we stayed on because we had to wait for the bus coming back from Dublin at 7 o'clock at night. And we would go to, it was a boarding school. So many of the students were daytime students, but a lot of them were boarders. And so we went into their study hall at night with the boarders, and we did our homework there. And we would hop on the bus at 7 o'clock at night and come home, and then we would have our dinner. Yeah, so it was different to probably most of the kids around. They didn't do that. They came home at 3 o'clock or 2:30, and did their homework at home and had their dinner early and all the rest. So it was a long day for us. It was really long. And school, I did okay in my exams. I didn't do flying. I didn't go on to university. I went on to do what we would have called a secretarial course right after my leaving cert, 1 year in Navan Community College. And that's where I did shorthand and typing to prepare me for the world, the secretarial job. And that was it.
So how old were you when you finished school?
I was 17 when I did my leaving cert. And I did 1 year in the community college secretarial course, and I left there when I was 18, and that's when I came here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Big jump.
Right, on my 2 days after my 18th birthday, I came here.
So let's jump ahead to that. What made you decide to come to the United States?
Well, I think like most people, there was a lot of immigration going on at the time, and I think Ireland has gone through many eras of that. There was a big chunk of time where there wasn't immigration. Like in my father's time, I think there was a huge deluge when he was a teenager, probably of his era coming to the United States. And then there was a time where people stayed and they did well and they got good jobs and they stayed in Ireland. And then I think around the time when I was a teenager, it started all over again, or probably had been starting for, 5 to 10 years prior to me, leaving. And my sister had just come over to Boston 2 years prior to that, I think 2 years. And I knew a couple of other friends who were coming over here. And so I, the American dream, I wanted to come and taste a little bit of that. And I was supposed to come for a year and I was coming over as a nanny with my best friend from school. The two of us came over together as a nanny. And I think I worked as a nanny for a summer out in New Jersey, Manilwoking, New Jersey. And then I said, enough of this. And I went off to Boston to my sister. And I stayed in Boston for, I think, 8 months or so. And then I came back down to New York. And that's kind of where I stayed for a long, long time until I moved to Connecticut.
And what did you do in the different places where you
So
lived?
I started in New Jersey, and I babysat for a young child there for a few months. And then the mother took an early retirement from her job. I guess it wasn't a retirement. She got laid off, and she got a nice incentive to stay home. And she was expecting another child and had wanted me to stay on in the job, but I could not imagine. I couldn't understand where I fit into that role, staying home with her. I couldn't figure that out. My mother reared 7 of us, and here she wanted me to stay home with her to mind her kids. So that wasn't for me. So I left and I went to Boston. And in Boston, I worked in a little coffee luncheonette type of a place, and it was called Uncle Bunny's. And I worked all day there, got there at 7 o'clock in the morning, worked really, really hard. I learned so much, though, when I think back, because, I hadn't experienced a lot of the foods. I experienced my first slice of pizza in Boston. And so I was 18, probably 18 and a half or something when I experienced pizza. So I experienced so many foods for the very first time in my life in this place, because they cooked chili. I never tasted chili, beef stroganoff, moussaka, spinach pie. They cooked all this stuff, and this was like people would come there for their lunch. And then they had ice creams, every flavor you could imagine. Of course, I grew up with vanilla, strawberry, and chocolate, if you were lucky. But they had everything. Oh, my mother made the best peppermint ice cream. So that was a flavor that I don't think too many people had experienced in Ireland, but she made really good peppermint ice cream. But that was one of my favorites, chocolate chip mint, when I came here. So I had, experiences of ice cream that I never tasted. So I, walked into this place and all the food temptations that I had never had before. Brownies, chocolate chip cookies, oatmeal cookies, oatmeal raisin. So I worked there for a long time, and at the same time I bussed in a restaurant at the weekends where my sister worked, called the Claddagh restaurant. It's still going today, the Claddagh restaurant. And I also started singing there before I left Boston. So they wanted me to come on full-time and be a waitress in the Claddagh, and I said, no, I'm too dedicated to Uncle Bunny's. I'm not leaving. I couldn't bear giving in my notice in this place, because this was my first real job, I suppose. So anyway, lo and behold, I ended up saying I want to go back to New York. And I had some time when I was in New Jersey. My aunt and uncle lived in Rockland County, New York, so I had visited there at the weekends when I was in New Jersey. So when I say back down to New York, I guess I had experienced it in a small way. So I left Boston, and I had lived near Cambridge during that time, right above my sister. My sister and her boyfriend had lived down in an apartment downstairs, and I lived upstairs, and I had one little room, where you shared rooms with lots of different, the top floor of a house with lots of different people. And I just had a bedroom. And then if you needed to take a shower, you walked down, took a shower that everybody else used, and the kitchen everybody else used. So I left there and went back to live with my aunt and uncle in Rockland County for a few months. And I waitressed when I was in Rockland County. And then I left there about 6 months later and headed to New York City, to Queens.
What part of Queens?
Queens, I first went to a place called Glendale. And I shared an apartment with an old friend from Navan, County Meath, when I lived there. And I waitressed in a place called the Waterfront Crab House. And I worked there for a few years. Loved that place. It was a great place to work. And then I started bartending in a bar in Queens called the Old Thatch. And I started singing throughout all this time as well. So I was singing on the side. I was singing in the bar that I worked in, plus other bars as well. And then I was fortunate enough to land myself a nice office job, finally, after all these years. and I started working in Memorial Sloan Kettering. And I started working there in 1990 as a temp. That's how I got in. And then I landed a permanent job in there at charge entry, and I did almost every position in that place before I left. I did charge entry, I did payment posting. It was the billing side of the hospital, and the physician's billing, really. So I did charge entry, payment posting, and then I was an auditor. And then I became a group leader, and then I became a supervisor of one of the areas, insurance, that's right. And then I became assistant manager of the collections unit and the insurance unit. And so I left there in 1999. And I had been living up in Connecticut for a year at that point, and I wanted to be home with my kids because they were really struggling with, me commuting back down to the city every day, and I didn't get home till late at night, and I was missing out on their youth. So I made a decision to give that job up, and I started back into the music as well. So I did that just at the weekends, and it was a great opportunity for me to be home with my kids during the week, and not such a great family life to be away at the weekends all the time, but it was what was needed at the time. So I'm still doing the music, but now I'm working for a company up here in Fairfield called Music Together. And it's a music program for very young children and their parents. And I started working there in their office, and then started experiencing their classroom, how they teach, and said, that's what I want to do. So I went through their training course a couple of months back and did an apprenticeship with them for teaching. So now I'm teaching the music to the young children, and I'm also still working in their office. So
I think I saw a newspaper article about you doing that, didn't I? Or a picture of you in the paper?
you might have. I don't know. I don't know. You might have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've kind of leapt
I
ahead.
did, didn't I? I just flew through those years. And that's how quick they went.
Well, when you decided to leave Ireland, how did your family feel about you going?
Oh, gosh. I can still remember my father crying. I remember my father crying twice. And he cried that day like I've never seen him cry. And I think my mother just knew I wanted to leave. She supported me. I'm sure she was devastated, but she did not show it. And she was just, one of these women that said, you just go for it. And she always did that with everything. And so I don't remember her being sad, or at least she just chose not to show that. But my father cried at the airport, and he cried, and he cried, and he cried. And then the whole way over here on the airplane, I cried. And my friend beside me, of course, we were coming over on a holiday visa at the time. And you're supposed to leave very quickly right after that. And, I had the intention of, doing a little nanny job for a little while and then going back home. But she kept, on the plane, she kept saying, would you stop crying? They're going to know that you're not in your holidays. And I think I got off with big red cheeks, and the flight was probably 6 hours. So 6 hours of crying, because you think you do, even though I said I'm coming back in a year is a long time. You think you're never going to see your family. Even a year not to see your family. I mean, I was still a baby looking back at 18-year-olds that I know now, and my eldest son is 14, and I think in 4 more years he could be saying, Mom, I'm leaving, and you might not see me for a year. I just couldn't imagine that now. But it felt like forever that I was never going to see them, and I think that's why I cried so much. And I thought I was so mature. I was ready for the world, and I was a big girl, and nothing was ever going to faze me. And here I am, blubbering the whole way over.
Did you fly out of Dublin?
Yeah.
And you flew into JFK?
JFK. So at that time, it stopped over in Shannon. Did our immigration in Shannon, I think. Oh, no, I probably did my immigration over here. So I flew into JFK. And I had my aunt and uncle meet me at the airport.
I see.
Yeah.
What was the first thing you bought when you got here? You don't remember?
Gosh. Let me think. Did I even have money? I had money, so I didn't have a lot of money when I came because I was getting ready to start working. I mean, I don't remember. Did I run out? I probably got Coke because that was something that we would not have had growing up. We didn't have Coke. I mean, it was there, but it just you could get Coke if you went to the shops, but we didn't have a lot of money, and so we would have Club Orange or Fanta was probably something that I would have bought more of. I don't know if they had Coke by the time I came over here. I just remember drinking Club Orange and Fanta. If you had a bit of pocket money, that's what you bought. So probably Coke, Coca-Cola, and then I remember my first slice of pizza in Boston. I'll never forget that. That was like the best thing I'd ever tasted in my whole life. I think it still is. And it might be because I have, it might be because I have that memory of it, the first slice of pizza.
And you've alluded to food. What kinds of things did you eat back in Ireland?
You've probably heard all this stuff over and over again. Very boring food, but I grew up loving it. I big lover of food. I love my food way too much. I had the second helpings when my American cousins came over. I apparently got the name trash can because if anybody had any leftovers, I would eat it, and I always had room for dessert. So anyway, I ate. We had typical things like potatoes. Of course, was part of every meal. I don't ever remember eating pasta in Ireland, which is now one of my favorite foods. But so potatoes. Turnips, I love turnips. Pork chops, so you'd have your meats, your pork chops, your chicken, roast beef. Steak and kidney pie was one of my favorite foods. I still love that with the pastry on top, the steak with the gravy and kidneys in it. Some people go, ugh, but I love that. Shepherd's pie, kidneys, and not kidneys, liver and onions I had. And ham would have been like bacon, and we would have, I suppose, did we call it bacon and cabbage? Bacon and cabbage would have been a Sunday dinner, a roast beef, cabbage, potatoes, gravy, stuffing, roast potatoes on a good day, on a really good day. Turkey we had at Christmas, every Christmas, turkey and ham. Sausages, of course, and rashers, black and white pudding. Baked beans, which are slightly different to the beans that you get here.
How are they different?
They're not like the pork beans that you get here, right? They've kind of got a more of a barbecue flavor. I want to say the pork beans do here. They had a sweet flavor. They would have been in what we would have called a tomato sauce, which kind of sounds horrible, but I still love them today. In fact, I had beans tonight before I left. And pork chop and potatoes. So I still always love my comfort foods. That's one of my comfort foods, baked beans and potatoes and turnips. And turnips is a big comfort food of mine. And I suppose we would have had your, typical eggs and things like that. So that was basically our food group right there. And then, of course, you had your desserts. My mum was a great baker. She baked after every Sunday. Every Sunday she'd put the oven on, so she did her whatever was the main meal for the day, roast beef. She would put on bread, her soda bread and her brown bread. You call it whole wheat here. And then she'd make scones and apple tarts and sponge cakes and, little buns. You call them cupcakes here. I'm thinking of all the names we called them growing up. So she was a fantastic baker. So we although we didn't have a lot of money and we didn't have a lot of food, she did justice with the desserts. She really did a great job at those. And a lot of the the potatoes and the turnips we grew ourselves. So a lot of our food came from the farm.
How about the beef?
The beef, no, my father would have sold the cattle externally, and he didn't butcher or anything like that. So, we had eggs, we had chickens, so we had our own eggs, and we made our own butter, which was horrible. You'd sit at that churn for hours, and you'd churn that butter that you just hated eating. And my parents would, They'd try tricks on you. They'd put it on different dishes so that you'd pretend that you were eating the creamery butter that you'd buy in the shops. And every time you lifted the butter dish, you knew immediately that it was the butter that you just spent hours churning. And they would always try and like fool you and put it in stuff, and you could taste the difference. So I still don't like the butter, but I loved buttermilk when I was growing up. I had the buttermilk, so that was before the butter was made. You'd have the buttermilk, and that was a very unusual flavor of unusual taste, and nobody else liked it, but I liked it. And let me see what else. So we had the milk that came from the cows. That was just for us. My father didn't sell the milk, so we had our own milk. My brother would milk the cows every morning, and he'd bring in the milk into the dairy and pour them into basins. And so we didn't have pasteurization or anything like that. It was strained in and like cool, and then after about an hour or two, you'd put a couple of jugs in the fridge, and you'd skim off the cream. So we had fresh cream every day. I had cream on my cornflakes or on my porridge, and that made the porridge taste really good, the cream, with sugar. And so we had, fabulous cow's milk, you'd call it cow's milk, and that's so silly because that's where it comes from, but we called it cow's milk because the rest of the country or our neighbours had store-bought milk. And whenever the cows were in calf, we were without milk for those times, and we had the store milk, and it tasted very different. Now I probably, if I went back to Ireland and I had the cow's milk directly from the cows, it would taste probably horrible. Because they homogenize it and pasteurize it and all that stuff, and it makes it taste different. By the time it gets into your fridge, it's very different to what we grew up with.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and then of course the lovely whipped cream, the fresh whipped cream, on all our cakes and tarts and cereal.
Well, how about your holiday customs, Liz? How about Christmas? How would you celebrate Christmas?
Typical Irish Christmas. I get a little nostalgic when I think about some of the stuff because it wasn't always the happiest Christmases, but we didn't have a lot, and I don't have a lot of memories of Christmas until I was a little older, and my younger sister and I still believed in Santa Claus, and I can remember you'd get one or two presents, really. You wouldn't get a lot, I can remember owning what we would have called Cindy dolls. They'd be equivalent to Barbie dolls, little tiny skinny little dolls, and you'd get an annual, your June or your Mandy annual. You don't have those things here. They're comics that come out every month in Ireland, and the male version of that would be Beano and Dandy. So every Christmas they would make these into annuals, and I can remember the annual, you'd have written on it from like the beginning to the end page over and over again. You'd have looked through that book 100 times because we didn't have a lot of books in the house. We couldn't afford the comics every week, so this was a huge novelty, And then of course you'd get clothes if they had the money to buy clothes. That was like new clothes for the year probably, because everything else was hand-me-downs, and. So we didn't have a lot, but I can remember probably my last Christmas, believing in Santa. My older sisters would go to midnight mass with my parents, and Colette and I were the youngest. So we'd be in bed when they got home from mass, and then of course we'd get up at the crack of dawn the next morning and go down to see what Santa had brought, and we'd get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and tiptoe through, because our bedroom, you had to go through our parents' bedroom to get downstairs, so we'd open the door and tiptoe down and not wake them, which now that is so unbelievable to me because we're up with our kids. We don't want to miss a thing, but we tiptoed through so we wouldn't wake them and creep down the stairs, and then you'd look down and you'd say, did he come yet? Did he come yet? And you'd see all the decorations twinkling, it was kind of magical. And then we went through what was called our dining room into the good room, the end room, and Colette's presents were there and mine were there, and that was it. So there was 7 kids, but that's all that came from Santa. So how we didn't figure it out quicker, I don't know. But I remember my brother coming back from midnight mass one Christmas Eve, and he came in and he says, Santa came, And we says, no, he didn't. You're messing with us. And he says, yeah, he didn't. We says, okay, tell us what he brought you. Well, he brought you a blackboard, and he brought you a Cindy doll, and he brought you an annual and some sweets. And you would have thought that that would have ruined it for us, but it actually didn't, because we just sat there all night going, God, we got a blackboard. We got a blackboard. So anyway, we did. We went down the next morning, and word for word, everything was there. He was so mean. He told us everything. I can't believe he did that. I doubt that he can remember that. But I do remember my mum then asking me one day in the Wolsey, driving over to Motley's Wood. Can remember it, right in front of Kenny's house. And she says to me, do you still believe in Santa? I think I was 11. Maybe I was younger. I think I was 10. And I said, kind of. Should I? And she goes, well, no. And the reason why she did that was because they just couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford to give us anything. So